Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Kabila is under pressure to stick to the schedule for upcoming presidential elections. His critics have not taken kindly to a court ruling that the Congolese leader can stay on as caretaker president until polls are held, even if that's after his mandate ends. Also, Kenya's Olympic dreams hit a hurdle on the road to Rio. The World Anti-Doping Agency finds the country's laws and drug testing facilities not up to scratch. Its athletes could be banned from the Olympic Games. And the Innovation Prize for Africa has been running for 5 years. It's about encouraging the work being done on the continent to provide real solutions to real problems. After this week's announcement of the latest crop of finalists, I speak to last year's winner about the importance of African entrepreneurship. Well, first, a day after the Constitutional Court controversially ruled that he could stay on as leader past the end of his mandate if elections are delayed, and Congolese President Joseph Kabila is facing pressure to stick to the polls scheduled date in November. Opposition leaders have reacted to the decision angrily. They've long accused him of angling to put the vote on hold in order to maintain his grip on power.
Congolese people are generally eager to talk politics. Today, DRC's highest court's decision is the #1 topic. President Kabila will remain in power if the government fails to hold elections in November.
It's written in the Constitution. It's not from the opposition and not from the majority. So we could at least respect that. Then maybe things would calm down in the country.
The President of the Senate is the one who should be replacing the President. If the Constitutional Court decided otherwise, I don't agree with that.
The opposition says this decision doesn't change anything. According to them, Kabila must leave at the end of the year, whatever happens.
If there isn't an election, it will be because Kabila will have refused to organize the poll. If he does not leave, we, the Congolese people, the leaders of the opposition, with our population, we will chase him out.
The government claims the court only applied what the Constitution says, so that the country won't be without a head of state for any amount of time.
The Constitution states the President's mandate ends on this date. If there is no newly elected President to whom he has to give the power at the end of his term, he has to wait until there is a new President to then hand over power.
It's still uncertain whether the election will go ahead in November as scheduled. Meanwhile, political tensions continue to rise daily in the Congolese capital.
In the run-up to the Rio Olympics, Kenya's sporting hopes have taken a hit. This after the country was, on Thursday, found to be in breach of the World Anti-Doping Agency's rules. The decision could lead to the country's athletes being banned from the Olympics. The bodies found that Kenya's drug testing agency and relevant legislation is not up to scratch. President Kenyatta had signed a new anti-doping law in April, but that wasn't enough. Duncan Woodside brings us more. Duncan, so this is a huge blow for the country's athletics community. What's the reaction been?
Well, indeed, yes, it is a blow, and it's something that was quite unexpected on the ground here in Kenya. People had anticipated the president signing the much-anticipated anti-doping law into effect in late April would mean that the country would get a clean bill of health from the World Anti-Doping Agency. Obviously, that hasn't happened. The World Anti-Doping Agency say that Kenya is non-compliant. So that's obviously creating some dismay here, and there is a very real possibility, of course, that the International Olympics Committee will now decree that Kenyan athletes will not be able to compete in the Rio Olympic Games. Those games are of course, quite close now. They will take place in August. So very little time for Kenya to get its house in order, and very real fears that their athletes will be banned from this summer's Olympic Games.
Thanks very much. Duncan Woodside there for us in Nairobi. Well, Nigeria's President Buhari held separate talks with the US Secretary of State on Thursday. This on the sidelines of an anti-corruption summit in London. Nigeria and Kenya are amongst a handful of countries who have agreed to try and stop the flow of dirty money through their systems by publishing registers of who really benefits from corporate ownership. Representatives from around 40 nations met to discuss cracking down on graft, bribery and money laundering. Nigeria's leaders said that governments have to do more to encourage transparency.
When it comes to tackling corruption, the international community has unfortunately looked the other way for too long. We need to step up and tackle this evil. This charge sums up why we are gathered here today.
Well, as leaders from across the continent meet in Kigali for the World Economic Forum on Africa, the question of the resources and changes needed to move the continent forward have taken centre stage. Intellectual capital is as important as the rest. This week, the 10 finalists up for a total $150,000 prize for African innovation were named by the African Innovation Foundation. Organisers say that it's not about patting people on the back, but raising the profile of a creative community that's often overlooked. The competition is for everyone, those impacting their neighbourhoods, new high-tech ideas, new ways of doing business. So for more on this, we're joined now by last year's IPA winner, Kenya's Alex Muriu. Alex, thanks very much for taking the time out to speak to us. So you won with Farm Capital Africa, which puts farmers in contact with investors. Tell us a bit more about how your business works.
Okay. So we've created a model called Farm Finance as a Service, and we've created it's a new way of financing small-scale farmers that is more accessible and is more affordable, as opposed to them going to a bank or going to a microfinance institution. The key unique element is how we are able to actually ingrain the financing in the process of farming, and they only pay when they actually get to harvest, as opposed to paying without considering the harvest cycles that they have.
So how did winning the IPA make a difference to the way that you run your business?
Well, the sheer exposure, because our business runs on being able to raise capital from investors and then channeling it to the small-scale farmers. So IPA helped us, one, to have a lot of exposure through the PR activities that they did. It raised our profile, so grew investor confidence in us. We were able to raise up to 4 times the amount of money we've been able to raise per month before we won the prize. So it has brought a huge change to actually how the business has been growing.
And why do you think that African innovators don't get perhaps as much international exposure as those from other parts of the world?
Well, Joshua, I've been an entrepreneur for about 7 years, and back in the day, there were no platforms that would give an innovator a chance to even just be able to showcase what they can do. In more developed economies, they have all these innovation ecosystems that really bring out innovations and create the big companies that you see out there. Africa hasn't had that for the longest time, but now we are having things like the IPA that is so useful and is helping bring that focus on local African innovation, which I think is going to make a huge difference.
And so do you think that things are changing in terms of people realizing the worth and scope in coming up with new ways of tackling problems people on the continent face day to day?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, now Africa is beginning to feel like a community of innovators. I have contacts now from all across Africa with other entrepreneurs, and we're able to exchange ideas and support each other in whichever way we can. Platforms like IPA enable that to happen, because when you meet these people, that's one of the main things that people really need: mentorship, where you are able to actually find someone who's been there before to help you take yours to the next level. So we need a lot more of these kinds of activities happening.
And do you think there's any particular sector that particularly needs investment and attention from both investors in entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs themselves to really move the continent forward?
Well, I operate in the agricultural sector, so I'm a bit biased to agriculture. But the reason I say that is because agriculture has a huge potential to not only create employment, but also grow things like food security and improve the incomes of low income earning members of African society. And that is actually the majority of them. So I would say agriculture and things like technology, I would say health is another big area. So those are the areas that I feel need a lot more focus, and they've not been getting the focus they actually deserve.
Thanks very much. Alex Muriu, the winner of last year's IPA prize. Well, that is it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us, and please do so again if you can. Take care.